Welcome everyone to this video. I'm going to analyze a game between Artyom Timofeev, white 2690, and Xiangzhi, black 2676. Excuse the pronunciation. Alright, so d4 by Artyom, d5, c4, queen's gambit, c6 Slav, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d takes c4. So this is the main line in the classical Slav. And there's a few ideas. At first it looks like it's given up the center, but there are a few positives here. For example, if you immediately play bishop f5, then white can take on d5 and play queen b3. So one idea is to just make it easy to develop the bishop to a nice square. And the second idea is that, well, black has won a pawn here, and white's gonna want to get that pawn back. He could play e4, but after b5, black is gonna hang on to that pawn. White's definitely got compensation with a strong center, but nevertheless black's going to keep the pawn. So instead, after d takes c4, white plays a4 to stop b5. But the drawback of this move and one of black's points is that now the b4 square has been weakened, and this will be a very nice place for a black minor piece. So black develops the bishop. As I said, this was one of the positives to get an easy, nice bishop development. e3, e6, bishop takes. You can see that bishop cannot be kicked with a3 because the pawn's on a4. Castle, castle, knight h4. Black plays knight on b to d7 here. Not actually so worried about knight takes c4, e takes f5, because there's some nice central control here despite the double pawns. Black can follow up with g6 and the pawn is not going to be won after something like queen f3. And white's bishop on c1 is quite bad as well. Usually white's plan in these kind of positions is to eventually play e4 to get the bishop out, but e4 is not really possible now because of this pawn on f5. So instead, after knight on b to d7, white plays f3, intending e4. Quite good, get a nice center. The drawback is it weakens some dark squares. Black plays bishop g6, so e4 doesn't come with tempo. e4, e5, like I said, challenging the dark squares after white's weakened them. Knight takes bishop, h takes bishop, bishop to e3, queen to e7. So yeah, black has some nice easy development here. Knight e2, knight b6, preparing rook a d8, opening the file for the rook to put pressure on d4. Queen to b3, so white decides that he is going to allow black to get rid of white's two bishops. So knight takes, queen takes. Knight to d7, defending the pawn on e5 once more. Rook fd1, rook fd8, a5. So maybe white's plan to play a6 here, and that's to try and undermine the c6 pawn. Once again, there's always a drawback though. a5 in itself is a bit of a weakness now. Rook a c8, queen b3, e takes d4, bishop takes d4. Knight to f8, so the knight's maneuvering to e6, which is a better square than d7. And it does look like it hangs the pawn on a7, but as I said before, a5 is weak, so after bishop takes a7, black played rook takes d1, white replied rook takes d1, and black took on a5. So the main thing to note here is the pawn majorities here. Black has a pawn majority on the queen side, so this means he can create an outside passed pawn here in the future. But white, on the other hand, has a nice pawn majority on the king side, and it's even better really than normal because these double pawns of black here are quite bad. It's not so great to have double pawns like this. If white, for example, got a pawn to e6, that would create a lot of weaknesses. So after bishop e3, black replied knight to e6, getting the knight to this nice square where it attacks a lot of squares. Knight d4, white decides to trade off his knight on e2, which can be argued as not as good as knight on e6. Knight takes rook d8, rook takes, queen takes. Yeah, so as I said before, we've got these pawn majorities, and black really just went with the quite easy plan of just trying to get a passed pawn here. I think white should have played f4, e5, e6, this kind of thing, which he didn't do. Because if you got pawn to e6, this would be very good really, because if f takes e6 then g6 would become weak. So yeah, so after h3 here by white, queen takes b7, doesn't work because of queen d1, king f2 and queen e1, checkmate. So white played h3, giving the king a square on h2, and black played bishop c7 because queen takes b7 still doesn't really work, because after queen d1 check, king f2, bishop h2, black's going to threaten queen g1 and queen takes g2, and white can't really stop this. So that's pretty unpleasant for white. So after king f2, now white does threaten queen takes b7, sorry. So black plays b5, and now after playing this move, black's really wanting to achieve the c5 pawn move. Perhaps a good plan here for white would have been to get his pawn on b4, and this would have fixed the two pawns like this. So after queen c3, queen d6, maybe there's ideas of queen g3 here. White played queen c5. Black doesn't want to trade queens because white's king is a bit more open than his. So after queen e6, king e2, bishop d8. Black's plan is clearly to play bishop e7 here, and to play c5 and b4. And yeah, another good point about this endgame is that the pawn on b2 is actually a bit weak here. So though white's not worse here, it's interesting to see how quickly it became worse for him, or it became hard for him to find a plan, whereas black's got this easy plan of advancing the pawns. So after bishop d4, black played king h7, bishop c3, that's a good diagonal for the bishop, bishop e7, queen d4, threatening mate on g7. So black played f6. So now when black achieves c5 and b4, which is gonna happen, b2 is gonna be a bit weak, and the bishop's gonna be kicked off this diagonal. So f4, I think maybe white should have tried this, sort of pushing his own majority a bit earlier on. c5, queen d5, queen a6. Once again, you really don't want to get that queen trade because white's king is actually quite badly placed. It's a bit weak and open here. Queen d3, queen a4, king f3, b4, bishop e1, and now things are turning bad for white. And as I said before, b2 is very weak. Queen a1, attacking b2, queen e2, c4 here. So if queen takes c4, then the bishop hangs. f5, c3, f5, c3, check, king takes, and the pass pawn's just winning now. Takes b3, h4. c4 is maybe a bit better because after b2 you can play bishop c3, queen, and black's probably still winning here, but it's not as easy. In fact, after b2 it's actually just easier to centralize the queen, follow up with stuff like bishop c5 and b2. White's king's just too weak. But white played h4, but this just loses now. b2, check, king h7, queen b5, queen d1 check, and white resigned here. There's no perpetuals, for example. King g3, queen, check, king h8, queen c8, and you can just play bishop f8 here. Queen takes and the checks run out. Next up, you can just play something like queen d3 or something like that. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like. If you didn't enjoy, leave a dislike. Bye.